I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd watch her own daughter nearly drown while her husband laughed. But life has a way of taking everything you thought you knew about people and turning it inside out until you can't recognize the faces you once loved. My name is Patricia Ann Thornton, and I'm 71 years old now. I've lived through 3 wars, 2 failed marriages, the death of my parents, and more heartbreak than most people see in 2 lifetimes. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened at Lake Harmon on July 14th, 2 years ago. If you're watching this from your living room, your car, or maybe late at night when you can't sleep because your own family has hurt you, I want you to leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story. Because I've learned that we're never really alone in our pain, we just think we are. And if you've ever felt that deep, bone-crushing betrayal that makes you question everything you thought was real, then you need to hear what I'm about to tell you. Make sure you check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about survival, revenge, and what happens when you refuse to stay silent. It started on a Tuesday morning. I remember because Tuesdays were always my day to drive up to Elliott County to visit my daughter, Rebecca. She'd married this man, Trevor Hastings, about 4 years prior, and from the very first time I met him, something in my gut told me he wasn't right. Not in an obvious way. He wasn't rude or cruel in front of me. He smiled. He shook my hand firmly. He called me and opened doors and did all the things that men do when they're performing decency instead of living it. But his eyes were cold. You know what I mean if you've ever met someone like that. The warmth stopped at his mouth. His eyes were calculating, watching, measuring how much he could get away with. Rebecca was 33 when she married him. She'd been through a rough divorce in her late 20s, and I think she was just tired. Tired of being alone. Tired of dating men who disappointed her. Trevor came along at the right time with the right words, and she fell for him fast. Too fast. I tried to warn her, gently, because you can't just tell your grown daughter that the man she loves is dangerous. She'll choose him over you every single time if you push too hard. So I stayed quiet. I smiled at the wedding. I held my tongue when I saw the way he dismissed her opinions at dinner or the way he'd check his phone while she was talking. I told myself I was imagining things. But I wasn't. By the time July rolled around, I'd started noticing changes in Rebecca. She'd lost weight. Not in a healthy way, in that hollow, anxious way that happens when someone's spirit is being slowly crushed. Her laugh didn't sound the same anymore. It was higher, more forced, like she was trying to convince herself she was happy. She wore long sleeves even in the summer heat, and when I asked her about it, she said she'd been gardening and didn't want to get sunburned. But I'm not a fool. I've been a woman for 71 years. I know what long sleeves in July mean. Trevor suggested the lake trip. He said it would be good for all of us, a family day, he called it. Rebecca seemed nervous about it, but she agreed because that's what she did now. She agreed to everything Trevor wanted. I didn't want to go. Something about the whole setup felt wrong to me. But Rebecca called me that Monday night and said, "Please come, Mom. I need you there." Her voice cracked when she said it, and that's when I knew. She wasn't asking me to come for fun. She was asking me to come because she felt unsafe. So I went. The drive to Lake Harmon took about 45 minutes from my house in Westfield. It's a beautiful lake, tucked into the hills with thick pine forests surrounding it and water so clear you can see 20 feet down in some spots. There's a public access area with a small beach and picnic tables, but Trevor had rented a private dock on the far side of the lake. He said he wanted privacy. Looking back now, I realize what he really wanted was isolation. When I arrived, Rebecca was already setting up a picnic blanket near the water's edge. She looked thin, too thin, in her blue sundress. Trevor was down at the dock, messing with a small motorboat he'd rented. He waved at me when I got out of my car, that same practiced smile plastered across his face. "Patricia. Glad you could make it," he called out. His voice was too loud, too cheerful. It grated on me. I walked down to where Rebecca was spreading out the blanket, and when she looked up at me, I saw it. Fear. Just a flicker of it in her eyes before she covered it with a smile. My daughter was afraid of her own husband, and I'd let it get this far. "Hey, Mom," she said softly, standing up to hug me. She felt fragile in my arms, like she might break if I held her too tight. "You okay, sweetheart?" I whispered into her hair. She pulled back and nodded, but her eyes said something different. "I'm fine. Just tired." Trevor came up from the dock then, wiping his hands on his shorts. "Boat's all set. Thought we could take it out after lunch." You ever been on a motorboat, Patricia? Once or twice, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I didn't trust myself to say more. We ate lunch, sandwiches Rebecca had made, fruit salad, chips. Trevor talked the whole time. About his job in sales, about a promotion he might get, about a golf trip he was planning with his buddies. Rebecca barely touched her food. She kept glancing at the water like it was something to be feared instead of enjoyed. After lunch, Trevor stood up and clapped his hands together. All right, who wants to go out on the boat? Rebecca hesitated. I don't know, Trevor. The water's pretty choppy today. It's fine, he cut her off. Don't be such a baby about it. My jaw clenched. Don't be such a baby. I'd heard men talk to women like that my whole life, and it never stopped making my blood boil. But I kept quiet. I was still trying to keep the peace, still trying not to make waves. I'll stay here, I said. You two go ahead. No, Mom, come with us, Rebecca said quickly. Too quickly. She didn't want to be alone with him on that boat. There's plenty of room, Trevor said, his tone making it clear that my presence was expected, not optional. So we all climbed into that little motorboat, Trevor at the helm, Rebecca in the middle, and me in the back. Trevor started the engine and pulled away from the dock, steering us out toward the center of the lake where the water was deepest. That's when everything started to unravel. Trevor killed the engine about 200 yards from shore. The boat bobbed gently in the water, and for a moment, it was peaceful. The sun was warm on my face, and the only sound was the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. Then Trevor stood up. Come on, Becca. Let's go for a swim. Rebecca shook her head. I don't want to. The water's too cold. It's not cold. You're being ridiculous. He reached down and grabbed her wrist. Not gently. Not playfully. He grabbed her like she was property. Trevor, stop, she started to say, but he pulled her to her feet. You need to loosen up, he said, and there was an edge to his voice now. Something mean creeping into it. I stood up too, my heart starting to pound. Trevor, if she doesn't want to swim, leave her alone. He looked at me then, and for the first time, he dropped the mask. The smile was gone. His eyes were flat and cold. This is between me and my wife, Patricia. Stay out of it. And then, before I could say another word, before I could even process what was happening, he shoved her. Hard. Rebecca didn't have time to scream. She went backward over the side of the boat, arms flailing, and hit the water with a sickening splash. But she didn't come up right away. I rushed to the side of the boat, screaming her name. Rebecca. Rebecca. The water had closed over her like a grave, and for a horrible, frozen moment, I couldn't see her. Then I saw it, a dark shape beneath the surface, not moving. She'd hit her head on something. Maybe the side of the boat. Maybe a submerged rock. I don't know. But she wasn't swimming. She was sinking. I screamed for Trevor to help her. I screamed until my throat was raw. But when I turned to look at him, he was just standing there, watching. And then, God help me, I'll never forget this as long as I live, he started to laugh. Not a nervous laugh. Not an uncomfortable laugh. A real, genuine laugh. Like this was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. That's when I knew. This wasn't an accident. This was planned. Time does strange things when someone you love is dying. It slows down and speeds up all at once, and every second feels like an hour, but also like no time at all. I was screaming Rebecca's name, leaning over the side of that boat so far I nearly went in myself, and Trevor was still laughing. That sound, that horrible, casual laughter, it's burned into my brain like a brand. I'll hear it in my nightmares for the rest of my life. Trevor, she's drowning. I screamed at him. Do something. He looked at me with this expression that I can only describe as amused contempt. Like I was a child throwing a tantrum over something insignificant. Relax, Patricia. She's fine. She needs to learn to take a joke. A joke. My daughter was unconscious underwater, and he called it a joke. I couldn't swim. Not well, anyway. I'm 71 years old with bad knees and a hip replacement from 3 years ago. If I went in after her, we'd both drown. But I couldn't just stand there and watch her die. I looked around desperately for something, anything, that could help. There was a life preserver attached to the side of the boat, and I grabbed it, hurling it toward where I'd last seen Rebecca's shape beneath the surface. It landed about 5 feet away from her. Useless. Trevor was sitting down now, one arm draped casually over the side of the boat, watching me panic like this was entertainment. "You're overreacting," he said. "She'll come up when she's ready." She hit her head. I shouted. "She's unconscious. Help her, you sick son of a..." That's when I saw movement near the shore. A man in a kayak had heard my screaming and was paddling toward us as fast as he could. Thank God. Thank God for that stranger whose name I still don't know but who I think about every single day. "Help!" I screamed at him, waving my arms. "My daughter's drowning. She's under the boat." The man didn't hesitate. He abandoned his kayak and dove into the water, swimming toward us with strong, even strokes. Trevor finally stood up then, and I saw something flicker across his face. Annoyance. He was annoyed that someone was interfering. The man dove under the boat, and for what felt like an eternity, there was nothing. Just the sound of my own ragged breathing and the gentle lap of water against the hull. Then he surfaced, dragging Rebecca with him. Her head lolled to the side, her hair plastered to her face, her lips blue. She wasn't breathing. "Pull her up," the man shouted at Trevor. "Now." Trevor moved slowly, deliberately slowly. He reached down and grabbed Rebecca under her arms, hauling her into the boat like she was a sack of grain instead of his wife. Her body hit the bottom of the boat with a thud, and he just dropped her there, water streaming off her soaked dress. I fell to my knees beside her, tilting her head back, checking for breath, for a pulse, for any sign of life. Nothing. Her chest wasn't moving. Her skin was cold and gray. The man in the water had climbed into the boat now, shoving Trevor out of the way. "Do you know CPR?" he asked me. "Yes," I said, my hands already moving. I'd taken a CPR class 15 years ago when I volunteered at the community center, and I prayed to God I remembered it right. I tilted Rebecca's head back, pinched her nose, and breathed into her mouth. Once. Twice. Then I started chest compressions, counting in my head, pressing down hard on her sternum the way they taught me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Trevor was standing over us, arms crossed. "You're going to break her ribs if you keep doing that." I ignored him. Kept counting. Kept compressing. The man from the kayak had his phone out, calling 911, giving them our location. I heard him say lake, drowning, not breathing, and my whole world narrowed down to my daughter's still, lifeless face. Breathe. Compress. Count. Breathe. Compress. Count. If you've ever loved someone so much that the thought of losing them feels like your own death, you know what I felt in that moment. Every compression I did was a prayer. Every breath I pushed into her lungs was a plea. Please. Please. Please don't leave me. And then, finally, she coughed. Water came up, and she gasped, her body convulsing as she choked and sputtered and fought her way back to consciousness. I rolled her onto her side, supporting her head, and she vomited lake water all over the bottom of the boat. But she was breathing. She was alive. I sobbed. I couldn't help it. I held her head in my lap and sobbed like a child while she gasped and coughed and slowly came back to me. The man from the kayak, his name was David Cole, I found out later, looked at Trevor with an expression of pure disgust. "What the hell is wrong with you? Why didn't you help her?" Trevor shrugged. "I didn't think it was that serious." David stared at him for a long moment, and I could see him trying to decide if Trevor was lying or just genuinely that callous. Then he turned back to me. "Ambulance is on the way. They'll meet us at the dock." Trevor started the engine without a word and steered us back toward shore. He didn't look at Rebecca once. Didn't ask if she was okay. Didn't apologize. He just drove that boat like nothing had happened, like his wife hadn't just nearly died because of him. Rebecca was conscious now, but barely. She kept trying to talk, but her words were slurred and confused. What happened?" "You hit your head, baby," I told her, stroking her wet hair back from her face. "But you're okay now. You're going to be okay." She looked up at me with unfocused eyes, and then she said something that made my blood run cold. "He pushed me." "I know, sweetheart. I know." "On purpose," she whispered. "He pushed me on purpose." I looked up at Trevor's back as he steered the boat. He was humming. Actually humming to himself like this was just another pleasant day on the lake. That's when I knew this wasn't over. Whatever Trevor had planned, Whatever he'd been doing to my daughter all these months, maybe years, this was just the beginning. And if I didn't do something, he was going to kill her. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, he'd finish what he started. By the time we reached the dock, I could hear sirens in the distance. The ambulance was coming. David helped me get Rebecca out of the boat and laid her gently on the dock. She was shivering violently now, her teeth chattering, but at least she was conscious. At least she was breathing. Trevor tied off the boat and climbed onto the dock, brushing past us like we were strangers. "I'm going to get the car," he said to no one in particular. David grabbed his arm. "You need to stay here and talk to the paramedics." "I said I'm getting the car," Trevor repeated, his voice dropping into something dangerous. He yanked his arm free and walked toward the parking lot. The ambulance pulled up then, along with a sheriff's deputy. 2 paramedics rushed over with a stretcher and equipment, immediately going to work on Rebecca, checking her vitals, putting an oxygen mask on her face, wrapping her in warming blankets. I stayed close, holding her hand, answering their questions as best I could. "Did she hit her head?" "Yes. She went into the water and didn't come up right away." "Was she unconscious when you pulled her out?" "Yes. She wasn't breathing. I did CPR." "You did good. You saved her life." I wanted to tell them that I shouldn't have had to. That her husband should have saved her. That her husband pushed her in the first place. But the words stuck in my throat because I was afraid. Afraid that if I said it out loud, Trevor would find a way to make me sound crazy. Afraid that no one would believe me. But then I looked at the deputy, a young woman, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a serious expression, and I thought about what Rebecca had whispered. He pushed me. On purpose. And I made a decision that would change everything. As they loaded Rebecca onto the stretcher, I walked over to the deputy. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "Officer, I need to report an assault." She looked at me sharply. "An assault?" "Her husband pushed her into the water on purpose. She hit her head and nearly drowned. I watched him do it, and then I watched him laugh while she was unconscious underwater. This wasn't an accident. This was attempted murder." The deputy pulled out a notebook. "What's your name?" "Patricia Thornton. I'm Rebecca's mother." "And where is the husband now?" I pointed toward the parking lot, where Trevor was leaning against his car, scrolling through his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. "Right there. Trevor Hastings." The deputy looked at him, then back at me. "I'm going to need you to come down to the station and make a formal statement. And I'll need to talk to your daughter when she's able." "She already told me he pushed her on purpose," I said. Those were her exact words. The deputy nodded slowly. "We'll investigate this, Mrs. Thornton. I promise you that." I watched as she walked toward Trevor, and I felt something shift inside me. Something hard and cold and furious. I'd spent my whole life trying to keep the peace, trying to be nice, trying not to make waves. And where had it gotten me? My daughter had nearly died because I'd been too polite to call out a monster when I first saw him. Never again. When Trevor saw the deputy approaching, his casual mask slipped for just a second. I saw panic flash across his face before he smoothed it away and turned on that fake charm again. But it was too late. I'd already seen the truth. The ambulance pulled away with Rebecca inside, and I followed in my car. But before I left, I turned back one more time to see Trevor talking to the deputy, his hands gesturing innocently, his face the picture of concern. I knew he'd try to lie his way out of this. I knew he'd say it was an accident, that Rebecca slipped, that I was a hysterical old woman who didn't understand what she saw. But I also knew something he didn't. I knew exactly who I was. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. Rebecca spent 3 days in the hospital. She had a concussion, mild hypothermia, and water in her lungs that could have turned into pneumonia if we hadn't gotten her there fast enough. But she was alive. That's what the doctors kept telling me. She was lucky to be alive. As if luck had anything to do with it. As if my daughter's survival was some kind of cosmic coin flip instead of the result of a man's calculated cruelty. I never left her side. I slept in the chair next to her bed, ate terrible hospital cafeteria food, and watched her sleep, afraid that if I closed my eyes for too long, something would happen to her. The nurses were kind. They brought me blankets and coffee and didn't ask too many questions when I told them I wasn't going anywhere. Trevor came to visit once. Once. He walked into that hospital room with flowers, cheap grocery store flowers, the kind you grab on your way to the checkout because you know you're supposed to but don't actually care, and he had the nerve to smile at me. "How's she doing, Patricia?" I stared at him. Just stared. I didn't trust myself to speak because if I opened my mouth, I was going to start screaming, and I knew that wouldn't help Rebecca. So I said nothing. He set the flowers on the windowsill and walked over to Rebecca's bed. She was asleep, her face still pale, dark circles under her eyes. He reached out to touch her hand, and I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "Don't touch her." He looked at me, surprised. "She's my wife." I said don't touch her. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes, but he pulled his hand back. "You're upset. I understand. It was a horrible accident. Get out." "Patricia." I said get out. Now. Before I call security. He opened his mouth to argue, but I reached for the call button next to Rebecca's bed, and that made him stop. He wasn't stupid. He knew that causing a scene in a hospital would look bad for him. So he held up his hands in mock surrender. "Fine. I'll leave. But you can't keep me away from my wife forever. Watch me." He left. And as soon as the door closed behind him, I sank back into my chair and started shaking. Not from fear, from rage. Pure, white-hot rage that felt like it might burn me alive from the inside out. Rebecca woke up a few hours later. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked around the room, confused and disoriented. "Mom." "I'm here, baby." I moved to her side, taking her hand. "You're in the hospital. You've been here for 3 days. 3 days." She tried to sit up, but I gently pushed her back down. "You have a concussion. You need to rest." She closed her eyes, and I watched her face as the memories came back. I saw the moment she remembered what happened. The boat, the water, Trevor's hands on her shoulders, shoving her backward. Her eyes flew open, wide and terrified. He tried to kill me. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to tell her it was an accident, that Trevor just didn't think, that he didn't mean it. But I couldn't lie to her. Not anymore. I know. She started to cry then. Not loud, dramatic sobs, quiet, hopeless tears that broke my heart in ways I didn't know were possible. I thought I was safe. I thought if I just did everything right, if I just kept him happy, he wouldn't. Wouldn't what, Rebecca? She looked away, ashamed. He hits me sometimes. Not where anyone can see. And he says things. Terrible things. He tells me I'm worthless, that no one else would ever want me, that I should be grateful he married me. And I believed him, Mom. I actually believed him. If you've ever felt helpless, truly, bone-deep helpless, you know what I felt in that moment. Because there's nothing worse than finding out your child has been suffering and you didn't see it. Or worse, you did see it and you didn't do enough to stop it. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice breaking. Because I was embarrassed. Because I thought I could fix it. Because I didn't want you to say I told you so. She finally looked at me, tears streaming down her face. You never liked him. I knew that. And I married him anyway because I was tired of being alone and I thought maybe if I just tried hard enough, I could make it work. But you can't make it work with someone who wants to hurt you, can you? No, baby. You can't. She was quiet for a long time, just crying softly, and I held her hand and tried not to think about all the ways I'd failed her. Because I had failed her. I'd seen the signs. The weight loss. The long sleeves. The forced laughter. And I'd told myself I was imagining things because it was easier than confronting the truth. But I wasn't going to fail her anymore. The police want to talk to you, I said gently. About what happened at the lake. She tensed. What did you tell them? The truth. That Trevor pushed you in on purpose. That he laughed while you were drowning. That he didn't help you even when I was screaming for him to. He'll deny it. I know. But there was a witness. A man named David Cole who pulled you out of the water. He saw everything. Trevor will say it was an accident. That I slipped. Her voice was flat, defeated. No one's going to believe me over him. I believe you. And that's going to have to be enough for now. The police did come to talk to her. Detective Angela Brennan, a middle-aged woman with short grey hair and a no-nonsense attitude, sat beside Rebecca's hospital bed and asked her to tell her exactly what happened. Rebecca did. She told her about Trevor grabbing her wrist, about him pulling her to her feet, about the shove that sent her over the side of the boat. She told her about hitting her head, about the water closing over her, about not being able to breathe or see or fight her way back to the surface. She told her everything. Detective Brennan wrote it all down. Did your husband say anything before he pushed you? He told me I needed to loosen up. And after? Did he try to help you? No. My mom said he just laughed. Detective Brennan looked at me, and I nodded. That's exactly what happened. He stood there laughing while my daughter was unconscious underwater. We're going to investigate this thoroughly, Detective Brennan said. But I need to be honest with you both. Cases like this are hard to prove. He's going to claim it was an accident. He's going to say you slipped, or that he was trying to help you into the water and you lost your balance. Without a clear video or multiple witnesses, it's often his word against yours. Rebecca's face crumpled. So he's just going to get away with it? I didn't say that. I said it's going to be hard. But hard doesn't mean impossible. Detective Brennan leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Rebecca, has your husband ever been violent with you before? The question hung in the air. This was it. This was the moment Rebecca could either tell the truth and start the long, painful process of escaping, or she could protect Trevor one more time and seal her own fate. She took a deep breath. Yes. He's hit me. Multiple times. He's shoved me, grabbed me hard enough to leave bruises, thrown things at me. He tells me I'm worthless. He controls where I go, who I talk to, how I spend money. He made me quit my job 6 months ago because he said I was flirting with my coworkers. I wasn't. I was just being friendly. But he didn't care. Detective Brennan wrote all of this down. Did you ever report any of this? No. I was afraid. And I thought I could handle it. I thought if I just did better, he'd stop. It's not your fault, Detective Brennan said firmly. None of this is your fault. Abuse is never the victim's fault. Rebecca nodded, but I could see she didn't quite believe it yet. Abuse does that to you. It gets inside your head and makes you think you deserve it, that you caused it, that you're the problem. It takes years to unlearn that kind of poison. I want you to consider getting a restraining order, Detective Brennan continued. And I want you to think about pressing charges for the previous assaults, not just what happened at the lake. Will that actually do anything? Rebecca asked. Or will it just make him angrier? It creates a paper trail. It shows a pattern of behavior. And yes, it might make him angry. But staying silent isn't keeping you safe either. He tried to kill you, Rebecca. Next time, he might succeed. Next time. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Because there would be a next time if we didn't stop this. Men like Trevor don't just stop on their own. They escalate. They push boundaries. They test how much they can get away with. And when they realize no one's going to stop them, they go further. After Detective Brennan left, Rebecca turned to me. What am I going to do, Mom? I don't have a job. I don't have any money. Trevor controls everything. If I leave him, I have nothing. You have me, I said. You have me, and you have your life, and that's more than enough. You're going to come stay with me. We're going to get you out of that house and away from him, and we're going to figure out the rest as we go. He won't let me go that easily. I don't care what he lets you do. You're leaving. And if he tries to stop you, I'll make sure the whole world knows what kind of man he really is. She looked at me with something like hope flickering in her eyes. You really think we can do this? I know we can. But what I didn't tell her, what I couldn't tell her yet, was that I wasn't just planning to help her escape. I was planning to make Trevor pay for what he'd done. Not just to Rebecca, but to every woman he'd ever hurt, every person he'd ever manipulated, every life he'd ever damaged with his cruelty. Because here's what I learned a long time ago, watching men like Trevor get away with things over and over again. Sometimes the system fails. Sometimes the police can't help. Sometimes justice doesn't come through legal channels. And when that happens, you have to create your own justice. If you've ever been in a situation where you felt powerless, where the person hurting you seemed untouchable, I want you to know something. You're not as powerless as you think. And if this story resonates with you, if you've been through something similar or you know someone who has, please leave a comment. Share your story. And make sure to check the description box below for more stories about survival and fighting back, because you're not alone in this. Rebecca was released from the hospital 2 days later. I drove her straight to my house, not to the home she shared with Trevor. We didn't even stop to get her things. I told her we'd deal with that later, when she was stronger, when we had a plan. Trevor called 4 to 7 times that first day. 4 to 7. I counted. Rebecca didn't answer any of them. On the 48th call, I answered. "Where is my wife?" he demanded. "She's safe. That's all you need to know. You can't keep her from me, Patricia. She's my wife. I have rights. You lost your rights when you tried to drown her. That's not what happened, and you know it. She slipped. It was an accident. I would never hurt Rebecca." I laughed. Actually laughed, because the audacity of this man, the sheer, breathtaking audacity, was almost impressive. "You stood there and laughed while she was dying, Trevor. I saw you. David Cole saw you. You can lie to the police, you can lie to yourself, but you can't lie to me." He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. Gone was the fake concern, the pretend innocence. Now his voice was cold and sharp. "You're making a big mistake, Patricia. You're turning Rebecca against me, and you're going to regret it." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." He hung up. And I sat there holding the phone, my heart pounding, knowing that I'd just declared war on a dangerous man. But I didn't care. Because my daughter was alive, and I was going to make damn sure she stayed that way. Trevor's threat didn't scare me. Not really. I'd been threatened by better men than him. My second husband, Ronald, used to threaten me all the time before I divorced him 20 years ago. I learned then that threats are often just smokescreens for weakness. Strong people don't need to threaten. They just act. But weak people, cowards, they threaten because it's all they have. Still, I wasn't stupid. I knew Trevor was dangerous. So I did what any smart woman does when she's dealing with a dangerous man. I started gathering information. The first thing I did was hire a private investigator. Her name was Monica Reeves, and she came highly recommended by my lawyer. Yes, I got Rebecca a lawyer too, a sharp-tongued woman named Janet Kowalski who specialized in domestic violence cases. Monica was in her mid-40s, a former police detective who'd gone private after getting fed up with department politics. She had short auburn hair, calculating green eyes, and the kind of confidence that comes from seeing the worst of humanity and not flinching. "What do you want to know about him?" Monica asked me when we met at a coffee shop in downtown Westfield. She had a leather-bound notebook in front of her and a pen poised to write. "Everything," I said. "Where he works, who his friends are, where he goes, what he does. But most importantly, I want to know if Rebecca was the first." Monica's eyebrows rose slightly. "You think there were others?" "Men like Trevor don't just wake up one day and decide to try to murder their wives," I said. "This kind of behavior builds over time. There's always a pattern. I want to know what that pattern is." Monica nodded slowly, a grim smile on her face. "You're smarter than most of my clients. Most people don't think that way. They think their situation is unique, that they're the only one. But you're right, abusers almost always have a history. Give me 2 weeks." It took her 10 days. When Monica called me and asked to meet, I knew she'd found something. I could hear it in her voice, that careful, controlled tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news and they're trying to figure out how to soften it. We met at the same coffee shop, and this time she brought a thick manila folder. "You were right," she said, sliding the folder across the table to me. "Rebecca wasn't the first." I opened the folder with hands that weren't quite steady. Inside were printouts, photographs, copies of police reports, medical records. The first document was a restraining order filed 6 years ago in Tennessee by a woman named Jennifer Walsh. There was a photograph of her, a pretty blonde woman with sad eyes, and beneath it, a police report detailing injuries she'd sustained. Bruised ribs. A black eye. Fingerprint bruises on her upper arms. The person who'd caused those injuries, Trevor James Hastings. "They were engaged," Monica said quietly. "She broke it off after he put her in the hospital. Filed the restraining order, but never pressed charges. She told police she just wanted to move on with her life." I flipped to the next document. Another woman. This one named Kimberly Russo from North Carolina. No restraining order this time, but medical records showing treatment for a broken wrist and multiple contusions. The intake notes mentioned possible domestic violence and patient reluctant to discuss cause of injuries. Trevor's name appeared in the notes as the patient's boyfriend. How many? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. That I could confirm. 4, including Rebecca. But there are probably more. These are just the ones who reported injuries or filed paperwork. Most victims never report. 4 women. 4 women that we knew about. Trevor had been doing this for years, moving from victim to victim, leaving a trail of broken bodies and broken spirits behind him. And no one had stopped him. Not the police. Not the courts. Not the system that was supposed to protect these women. He'd gotten away with it every single time. There's more, Monica said, and her expression darkened. Jennifer Walsh, the woman from Tennessee. What about her? She's dead. The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. What? She died 3 years ago. Officially ruled an accident. She fell down a flight of stairs in her apartment building. Broke her neck. Monica paused, letting that sink in. Want to guess who was living in the same building at the time? My blood turned to ice. Trevor. Trevor. They'd crossed paths again, totally by chance, according to him. He gave a statement to the police saying he'd run into her at the building. They'd chatted briefly, everything was friendly. 2 weeks later, she was dead. And no one thought that was suspicious. The police investigated, but there was no evidence of foul play. No witnesses. No signs of struggle. Jennifer had been drinking that night. Her blood alcohol was 0.12. The official conclusion was that she was intoxicated, missed a step, and fell. Monica leaned forward, her voice dropping. But here's the thing, Patricia. I talked to some of Jennifer's friends. They said she rarely drank after what Trevor did to her. She'd developed anxiety around alcohol because Trevor used to get violent when he was drunk. So the idea that she'd get drunk enough to stumble downstairs? Her friends said it didn't make sense. I thought about Rebecca at the lake. How easy it would have been for Trevor to claim she'd slipped, that she'd lost her balance, that it was a tragic accident. If that stranger, David Cole, hadn't been there to witness it, if I hadn't insisted on pressing charges, the official story would have been exactly that, a tragic accident. Jennifer Walsh's death wasn't an accident. I knew it in my bones. Trevor had killed her and made it look like one. Can we prove it? I asked. Can we reopen the investigation? Monica shook her head. Not with what we have. It's all circumstantial. He was in the building, yes, but that's not proof. And it was 3 years ago. Any physical evidence is long gone. The case is closed, and unless someone comes forward with new information, it's going to stay closed. So he just gets away with it. Again. That's how it works sometimes. I'm sorry. I closed the folder, my hands shaking with rage. 4 women. Possibly 5, if you counted Jennifer's death. And Trevor was still walking around free, still living his life, still able to hurt people. The system had failed. Failed Jennifer. Failed Kimberly and the others. Failed Rebecca. But I wasn't going to fail her. I want you to keep digging, I said to Monica. I want everything you can find on him. Bank records, phone records, emails, social media, everything. I don't care what it costs. What are you planning, Patricia? I'm planning to make sure he never hurts anyone ever again. Monica studied me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing something in her mind. Finally, she nodded. I'll get you what I can. But be careful. Men like Trevor, when they feel cornered, they get dangerous. He's already dangerous. That's the point. I took the folder home and showed Rebecca everything. I watched her face as she read through the documents, saw the horror and recognition and grief pass across her features. She cried when she read about Jennifer Walsh. He killed her, Rebecca whispered. He killed her, and he was going to kill me too. I know. Why didn't anyone stop him? All these women, all these reports, and no one did anything. Because the system is broken, I said. Because these things get investigated and forgotten. Because women's pain doesn't matter enough. Because men like Trevor know exactly how far they can push before they cross a legal line, and they're very good at staying just on the right side of it. Rebecca looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. What are we going to do? This was the moment. The moment I could have said, "We'll let the legal system handle it. We'll trust Detective Brennan. We'll do everything by the book." And maybe if I was a different person, a more trusting person, a person who believed the system worked, I would have said that. But I wasn't that person. I'd seen too much. Lived too long. Watched too many men get away with too much. "We're going to destroy him," I said. Rebecca blinked. "What?" "We're going to take everything from him. His reputation, his job, his freedom, his future. We're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of monster he is. And we're going to do it in a way that he can't recover from." "Mom, I don't know if..." "He tried to kill you, Rebecca. He laughed while you were dying. And before you, he hurt at least 3 other women we know about and possibly killed a 4th. How many more women does he get to hurt before someone stops him? How many more Jennifers? How many more Kimberlys? How many more Rebeccas?" She was quiet for a long time, staring down at Jennifer Walshy's photograph. Finally, she looked up at me. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to be strong. I need you to testify when the time comes. I need you to tell your story, over and over again, to anyone who'll listen. Can you do that?" "Yes. And I need you to trust me. Because some of what I'm going to do isn't going to be pretty, and it isn't going to be legal, and I need to know you won't try to stop me." Rebecca hesitated, and I saw the conflict in her eyes. She was a good person. She'd always been a good person, the kind of person who followed rules and believed in doing things the right way. But Trevor had beaten that goodness out of her, and what was left was something rawer, something angrier. "I trust you," she said finally. "Do whatever you have to do." So I did. The first thing I did was leak the information to the press. Monica had a contact at the local newspaper, a journalist named Frank DeLuca who specialized in investigative pieces about violence against women. I gave him everything: the police reports, the medical records, the restraining orders, Jennifer Walshy's death. I gave him Rebecca's story and permission to use her name. And I gave him Trevor's employment information. Frank ran the story 3 days later. The headline read, "Local man accused of attempted murder has history of violence against women." It was front-page news. The article was devastating. Frank didn't hold back. He detailed every accusation, every injury, every woman who'd tried to escape Trevor and been punished for it. He included quotes from Rebecca. "I thought he was going to let me drown. He just stood there, laughing," and from me. He even managed to track down Kimberly Russo, who finally agreed to speak on the record about what Trevor had done to her. "He told me if I ever left him, he'd make sure no one else would want me," Kimberly said in the article. "Then he broke my wrist to prove his point." The response was immediate and explosive. The story got picked up by regional news outlets, then state news, then national. Within a week, Trevor's face was everywhere, on television, on social media, in newspapers. People were calling him a monster, a predator, a killer who'd gotten away with it for too long. His employer, a medical supply company where he worked in sales, put him on administrative leave while they investigated the allegations. 3 days after that, they fired him. His friends started distancing themselves. His social media accounts got flooded with angry comments. Someone spray-painted "wife beater" on his garage door. Trevor was being destroyed in the court of public opinion, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But he tried. He hired a lawyer, an expensive one, from what Monica told me, and threatened to sue me, Rebecca, Frank, and the newspaper for defamation. His lawyer sent threatening letters claiming we'd damaged Trevor's reputation with false and malicious accusations. Janet Kowalski, Rebecca's lawyer, sent back a 1-sentence response: "Truth is an absolute defense to defamation." The lawsuit never materialized. Because Trevor knew that if it went to court, everything would come out. Every detail. Every woman. Every lie. And he couldn't afford that. Detective Brennan called me 2 weeks after the article ran. "You've made my job a lot easier," she said. "And a lot harder." "What do you mean?" "Easier because public pressure means my department is taking this seriously now. We're building a case against him for the attempted murder charge, and we're looking into Jennifer Walshy's death again. But harder because his lawyer is screaming about how his client can't get a fair trial with all this media attention. He's going to argue that you poisoned the jury pool." "I don't care about a fair trial," I said. "I care about justice." "Those aren't always the same thing, Patricia." I know. That's why I'm doing this. Detective Brennan sighed. Look, I understand why you're angry. I do. But you need to be careful. If you push too hard, if you do something illegal, you could compromise the entire case. Trevor could walk free because of a technicality. Then I'll make sure I don't leave any technicalities. Patricia. He tried to kill my daughter. I don't care about playing by rules that were designed to protect men like him. I care about making sure he can never hurt anyone again. There was a long silence. Then Detective Brennan said, I didn't hear any of that. Hear what? Exactly. She hung up. I knew I was crossing lines. I knew that what I was doing, the media campaign, the public shaming, the relentless pressure, might complicate the legal case against Trevor. But I also knew that the legal case might not be enough. Even with everything we had, there was a chance Trevor could beat the charges. Attempted murder is hard to prove when there are no other witnesses except family members, when a good lawyer can spin it as a tragic accident, when the defendant has no prior criminal convictions. And I couldn't take that chance. So while Detective Brennan built her case, I built mine. And mine didn't rely on the legal system. Mine relied on something much more powerful, the truth. If you've ever felt like the system failed you, like the people who were supposed to protect you looked the other way, then you understand why I did what I did. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom. Sometimes you have to create it yourself. And if this story has shown you that you're not alone in that fight, please comment below and share your experience. Check the description box for more stories about people who refused to stay silent, who fought back, who said enough. Because that's what I was saying now. Enough. Trevor wasn't going to hurt anyone else. Not on my watch. Not ever again. Trevor tried to fight back, of course. Men like him always do. They can't handle losing control, can't handle being exposed, can't handle the world seeing them for what they really are. 2 weeks after the newspaper article ran, he started his own counter-campaign. He went on social media claiming he was the real victim, that I was a manipulative mother-in-law who'd never liked him, that Rebecca was mentally unstable and had turned against him because of my influence, that the whole drowning incident had been an accident blown out of proportion by a hysterical old woman. His words, not mine. He posted old photos of him and Rebecca looking happy together, with captions like, before her mother poisoned her mind against me and I loved my wife, but her family destroyed our marriage. He started a hashtag, #MyTruthMatters. He gave interviews to men's rights blogs claiming he was a victim of false accusations and a biased system that always believed women over men. Some people believed him. That's the thing about manipulation. It works on a certain percentage of people no matter how obvious the lies are. Trevor had always been charming, always been good at presenting himself as the reasonable one, the calm one, the victim of circumstances beyond his control. And there are always people willing to believe a man who claims he's being falsely accused, especially when that man looks and talks like Trevor, clean-cut, well-spoken, normal. But most people didn't believe him. Because most people could see through the performance. And more importantly, more women started coming forward. A woman named Ashley Porter reached out to Monica after reading the article. She'd dated Trevor 7 years ago, before any of the others. She'd never filed a police report, never told anyone what happened, but she still had the scars. She sent photos, cigarette burns on her inner arms that Trevor had inflicted when she'd threatened to leave him. She sent text messages where he'd threatened to kill himself if she broke up with him, where he'd called her horrible names, where he'd detailed exactly how he'd hurt her if she ever told anyone what he'd done. Then came Nicole Hammond, who'd worked with Trevor 3 years ago. He'd sexually harassed her repeatedly, comments about her body, accidental touches, cornering her in the break room to ask her out even after she'd said no a dozen times. She'd reported it to HR, but Trevor had been a top salesperson, and HR had done nothing except tell her to try to avoid being alone with him. She'd eventually quit her job to escape him. And then, this one broke my heart, came Amanda Chen, who was 23 years old and had briefly dated Trevor when she was 19. He'd been 32 at the time. She'd been a college student working at a restaurant where Trevor was a regular customer. He'd pursued her relentlessly, showering her with attention and gifts, making her feel special and mature. Within a month of dating, he'd started controlling everything, what she wore, who she talked to, where she went. When she'd tried to break up with him, he'd shown up at her dorm room drunk and forced his way inside. Campus security had escorted him out, but Amanda had been too scared and ashamed to press charges. 7 women total. 7 women willing to go on record. And Monica said there were at least 3 more who'd reached out but didn't want their names used. 10 women. Probably more who never came forward. Trevor James Hastings wasn't just an abuser. He was a serial predator who'd spent at least a decade hurting women and getting away with it. I gave all of this information to Detective Brennan, to Frank DeLuca, and to Janet Kowalski. Frank ran a follow-up article. More women come forward with allegations against Trevor Hastings. This time, the story went viral. It was shared hundreds of thousands of times on social media. News outlets across the country picked it up. Domestic violence organizations used Trevor as a case study in how predators operate and how the system fails to stop them. Trevor's carefully constructed life was falling apart. He lost his apartment. The landlord didn't renew his lease after the publicity. He couldn't get another job. No company wanted to hire someone with his name attached to that kind of scandal. His family started distancing themselves from him. His father gave an interview to a local news station saying, "I don't know what to believe anymore, but if my son did these things, he needs to face consequences." Even Trevor's friends abandoned him. Monica found social media posts from his former buddies explicitly saying they'd cut ties with him after learning what he'd done. Trevor was being systematically dismantled, and I felt no guilt about it whatsoever. But I should have known he wouldn't go down without a fight. It was a Thursday evening, about 6 weeks after the lake incident. Rebecca was staying with me, and she'd started seeing a therapist twice a week, a wonderful woman named Dr. Sylvia Martinez who specialized in trauma from domestic violence. Rebecca was slowly getting better. She'd gained a little weight back. She smiled more. She'd even started talking about going back to school to finish the degree she'd abandoned years ago. We were in the kitchen making dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, when my doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the front door, expecting maybe a package delivery or a neighbor. I looked through the peephole and froze. Trevor was standing on my porch. My first instinct was to yell for Rebecca to call 911, but then I noticed something. Trevor wasn't alone. There was a woman with him, middle-aged, professional-looking, carrying a briefcase. And Trevor's body language was different. Not aggressive. Almost defeated. I opened the door but kept the security chain on. "What do you want?" "I need to talk to Rebecca," Trevor said. His voice was flat, exhausted. "Absolutely not." The woman stepped forward. "Mrs. Thornton, my name is Catherine Voss. I'm Mr. Hastings's attorney. We're not here to cause trouble. We'd like to propose a settlement." "A settlement? May we come in? Just for a few minutes. You can keep the door between us if that makes you more comfortable, but this is a conversation that would benefit everyone involved." I should have told them to leave. I should have slammed the door in their faces and called the police. But curiosity got the better of me. What kind of settlement could Trevor possibly offer that would make any of this better? "Wait here," I said. I closed the door and went back to the kitchen, where Rebecca was standing frozen, a wooden spoon still in her hand. "Is that him?" she whispered. "Yes. He has a lawyer with him. They want to talk about a settlement." "I don't want to see him." "You don't have to. But I think we should hear what they have to say. Knowledge is power, right?" Rebecca nodded slowly. "Okay. But I'm calling Janet first." "Good idea." Rebecca called Janet Kowalski, put her on speaker, and explained the situation. Janet said, "Don't agree to anything without running it by me first. But yes, hear them out. I'll stay on the line." I went back to the front door and opened it, keeping the security chain on. Trevor and Catherine Voss stood on the other side, visible but separated from us by the door frame. "You have 5 minutes," I said. Catherine Voss took the lead, which was smart. No one wanted to hear from Trevor. "Mrs. Thornton, my client is willing to offer a substantial settlement to resolve this matter without further litigation. He's prepared to grant Rebecca an uncontested divorce with a significant financial settlement. We're talking 6 figures. He'll also agree to a permanent restraining order with no expiration date. In exchange, we're asking that Rebecca drop the criminal charges and that both of you cease any further public statements about my client." I stared at her. Then I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The audacity of it was almost funny. "You think we can be bought?" I said. "You think money is going to make up for the fact that he tried to murder my daughter?" "Mrs. Thornton." He stood there and laughed while she was drowning. He has a history of violence against at least 10 women that we know about. One of those women is dead. And you think a pile of money and a piece of paper saying he'll stay away is going to fix that? Trevor finally spoke, and his voice was raw. I'm sorry. He looked past me, trying to see Rebecca in the house. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It got out of control, and I... Shut up, I said. Don't you dare apologize to her. Don't you dare pretend you're sorry now that you've been caught. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you're facing consequences for it. Catherine Voss held up a hand. Mrs. Thornton, please. My client is trying to make amends. Your client is a monster, and we're not interested in your blood money. From behind me, I heard Rebecca's voice, stronger than I'd heard it in months. Tell him I'll see him in court. Catherine Voss's expression hardened. Mrs. Thornton, Rebecca, I strongly advise you to reconsider. If this goes to trial, it's going to be long, expensive, and emotionally draining. The media attention will be relentless. Every detail of your lives will be examined. And there's no guarantee of a conviction. Attempted murder is incredibly difficult to prove, especially when the only witnesses are the victim and her mother. I finished. I know. But we're willing to take that chance. You're making a mistake. We've made mistakes before. This isn't one of them. I started to close the door. Wait, Trevor said desperately. Rebecca, please. I love you. I never wanted any of this to happen. I just... You love her? I said, incredulous. You love her. You stood there and watched her drown, and you call that love? It was an accident. It wasn't an accident. Rebecca's voice rang out from inside the house, and she appeared behind me, her face flushed with anger. You grabbed me. You pushed me. You laughed while I was dying. I remember all of it, Trevor. Every second. And I'm going to make sure a jury hears every second of it too. Trevor's face crumpled. For just a moment, I saw real fear in his eyes. Rebecca, please. Get off my mother's property. Now. Or I'm calling the police and telling them you violated the temporary restraining order. Catherine Voss put a hand on Trevor's arm. Let's go. She looked at me one more time. You'll regret this. No, I said. But your client will. They left. I closed and locked the door, and Rebecca collapsed against me, shaking. But she wasn't crying. She was laughing, this wild, almost hysterical laugh of relief and triumph. I did it, she said. I stood up to him. You did, baby. You did. Janet's voice came through the phone speaker, which we'd forgotten was still on. That was beautiful, Rebecca. And also, I'm going to need both of you to write down everything that was just said while it's fresh in your minds. Trevor showing up here is a violation of the restraining order. We can use that. We spent the next hour writing out detailed accounts of the conversation, and Janet filed a motion with the court the next morning. Trevor's bail was revoked, and he was taken into custody to await trial. That was the beginning of the end for him. The trial date was set for 3 months later. Detective Brennan had built a solid case, testimony from me, from David Cole the kayaker, from Rebecca, from the emergency room doctors who'd treated her. They had photos of her injuries, medical records documenting the concussion and water in her lungs, expert testimony about drowning scenarios and how her injuries were consistent with being pushed rather than slipping. But Catherine Voss was right about one thing. It was going to be brutal. The prosecution called me as one of their first witnesses. I sat in that witness box and told the jury everything I'd seen. Trevor grabbing Rebecca's wrist, the argument about swimming, the shove, the splash, the laughter. I described in excruciating detail what it felt like to watch my daughter drowning while her husband did nothing. Catherine Voss's cross-examination was designed to make me look like a hysterical, biased old woman who'd misinterpreted an innocent moment. She suggested I had poor eyesight. She questioned whether I really understood what I'd seen. She implied I'd always hated Trevor and was using this as an excuse to break up his marriage. I didn't let her rattle me. I know what I saw, I said calmly. And I know the difference between an accident and attempted murder. Your client pushed my daughter into that lake on purpose, and then he laughed while she nearly died. That's not a misunderstanding. That's not bias. That's the truth. The jury listened. I could see it in their faces. They believed me. David Cole testified next, describing what he'd seen and heard when he kayaked over to help. The husband was just standing there, David said. Not panicking, not trying to help. Just watching. When I asked him why he wasn't helping, he said, "She needs to learn to take a joke." Those were his exact words. Then came Rebecca. If you've ever had to testify against someone who hurt you, someone you once loved, you know how hard it is. You have to sit there in a public courtroom and describe the worst moments of your life while your abuser sits just feet away, watching you. You have to relive every detail, every blow, every cruel word. And you have to do it knowing that the defense attorney is going to try to tear you apart, to make you look like a liar, to suggest you're exaggerating or making it up for attention or money. Rebecca was terrified. Her hands shook as she took the oath. But when she started talking, her voice was steady. She told them about the years of abuse. The hitting. The verbal cruelty. The control. The isolation. She told them about that day at the lake, how Trevor had grabbed her, how he'd shoved her backward, how she'd hit her head on something hard as she went into the water. She described the sensation of sinking, of not being able to breathe, of looking up through the water and seeing Trevor's blurry form above her, not moving, not helping. "I thought I was going to die," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "And in that moment, I realized he wanted me to die. That's why he pushed me. That's why he didn't help. He wanted me dead." Catherine Voss's cross-examination was vicious. She tried to suggest that Rebecca had mental health issues that made her perception unreliable. She brought up Rebecca's previous divorce, implying she had a pattern of making false accusations against men. She questioned why Rebecca had never reported the abuse before if it was really as bad as she claimed. But Rebecca didn't break. "I didn't report it because I was afraid," Rebecca said. "Afraid he'd hurt me worse. Afraid no one would believe me. And I was right to be afraid, wasn't I? Because even now, after he almost killed me, you're standing here suggesting I'm making it up." The courtroom was dead silent. "I'm not making it up," Rebecca continued, her voice rising. "He abused me for years. He tried to kill me. And the only reason I'm alive right now is because my mother and a stranger were there to save me. Not my husband. A stranger." When Rebecca stepped down from the witness stand, I saw several jurors wiping their eyes. The defense tried to spin it. They brought in character witnesses who said Trevor was a good guy, a hard worker, someone who'd never hurt anyone. But the prosecution countered with testimony from Ashley, Kimberly, Nicole, and 2 of the other women Trevor had hurt. One by one, they got up there and described what he'd done to them, creating an undeniable pattern of violence and control. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the 4 women stood and read the verdict. "We find the defendant, Trevor James Hastings, guilty of attempted murder in the 1st degree." Rebecca grabbed my hand and sobbed. Trevor's face went white. Catherine Voss immediately began talking about appeals, but I knew it was over. He was guilty. Finally, officially, legally guilty. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison. 25 years. It wasn't enough, it would never be enough, but it was something. It was justice, real justice, the kind that meant Trevor couldn't hurt anyone else for a very long time. As they led him away in handcuffs, Trevor looked back at Rebecca one last time. I expected to see anger or hatred in his eyes. But what I saw was something else. Fear. He was afraid. Afraid of prison, afraid of consequences, afraid of spending the next quarter century locked in a cell. Good. He should be afraid. After the trial, Rebecca and I walked out of that courthouse into bright sunlight. There were reporters everywhere, cameras flashing, microphones thrust in our faces. Frank DeLuca was there too, smiling at us. "Do you have a statement, Rebecca?" someone called out. Rebecca stopped. She looked at all those cameras, all those people waiting to hear what she had to say. And then she spoke. "My name is Rebecca Thornton, and I'm a survivor. Trevor Hastings tried to kill me, but I'm still here. And to any woman watching this who's in a relationship with someone who hurts her, who controls her, who makes her feel worthless, you can survive too. You can get out. You can fight back. And there are people who will help you. Don't stay silent. Don't protect your abuser. Tell someone. Report it. Do whatever you have to do to survive." The cameras kept flashing, and I stood beside my daughter with my arm around her shoulders, proud of her in ways I couldn't put into words. She'd done it. She'd stood up to her abuser and won. And if you're reading this, if you're in a situation like Rebecca was, please know that you can do it too. You're stronger than you think. And you're not alone. Check the description box below for resources and more stories of survival, because every story matters. Every voice matters. Justice was served that day. But the story didn't end there. Because there was still one more thing I had to do. You'd think that after Trevor was sent to prison, everything would go back to normal. That Rebecca and I could just move on with our lives, close this chapter, and start healing. And for a while, that's exactly what happened. Rebecca continued therapy with Dr. Martinez. She enrolled in community college to finish her degree. She started smiling again, real smiles, not the forced ones she'd worn during her marriage. She even started dating again, cautiously, after about a year. I thought we were done with Trevor Hastings. I was wrong. It started about 18 months after his conviction. I got a letter in the mail from an attorney I'd never heard of, Mitchell Brenner from a law firm in the city. The letter informed me that I was being sued for defamation, emotional distress, and conspiracy to interfere with Trevor's constitutional rights. The plaintiff was Trevor James Hastings. He was suing me from prison. The lawsuit was absurd on its face. Everything I'd said about Trevor was true and documented. But that wasn't the point. The point was harassment. Trevor couldn't hurt Rebecca or me physically anymore, but he could hurt us legally. He could drag us back into court, force us to spend money on lawyers, make us relive everything all over again. It was one last way to maintain control, even from behind bars. Janet Kowalski took the case, and she was furious. "This is a slap suit," she told me. "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's designed to silence you through legal intimidation. We'll get it dismissed, but it's going to cost you time and money." How much money? Probably $15,000 to $20,000 in legal fees by the time we're done. Maybe more if he appeals. I felt sick. I was living on Social Security and my late husband's pension. I didn't have $15,000 to spend on a frivolous lawsuit. But then something amazing happened. Frank DeLuca wrote another article about Trevor's lawsuit, framing it as a convicted abuser trying to silence his victim's family. Within 48 hours, a GoFundMe page appeared. I never found out who started it, to help cover my legal fees. It raised $60,000 in 2 weeks. People from all over the country donated, some as little as $5, some as much as $1,000. Strangers were helping me fight back. People I'd never met believed in what we were doing. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice 6 months later. The judge called it frivolous and a transparent attempt to harass the plaintiff. He ordered Trevor to pay my legal fees, though I knew I'd never see that money. He had nothing left. But the lawsuit revealed something I hadn't known. Trevor had been writing letters. Lots of letters. From prison, he'd been sending correspondence to anyone who would listen: men's rights groups, conservative commentators, anti-feminist websites. He was positioning himself as a victim of a corrupt system that automatically believed women over men. He was claiming he'd been falsely accused. Railroaded by a biased jury, destroyed by a vindictive mother-in-law who'd manipulated her mentally ill daughter into lying about him. Some people believed him. Not many, but enough to be disturbing. There were online forums dedicated to his case, where men shared his letters and discussed how to support him. They called Rebecca a liar. They called me a monster. They said Trevor was the real victim of abuse by a legal system that hated men. It made me sick. But it also made me realize something. Trevor hadn't changed. He was still manipulating, still lying, still trying to control the narrative. And he'd keep doing it for as long as he could draw breath. I started researching him more deeply. Not his past this time, I knew all about that. His present. I wanted to know what his life in prison was really like, whether he was suffering the way he'd made so many women suffer. What I found out made my blood boil. Trevor was in a medium security facility, not maximum. He'd been classified as non-violent, despite his attempted murder conviction. He had his own cell. He worked in the prison library, a cushy job that kept him away from the more dangerous inmates. He joined a Christian reform group that gave him special privileges. He was taking correspondence courses and had somehow convinced the prison administration that he was a model prisoner working on rehabilitation. Monica Reeves, my private investigator, dug even deeper. She found out that Trevor had become popular in prison, not with the violent offenders, but with the white-collar criminals and the other wrongly accused men. He'd positioned himself as a leader, someone fighting against false accusations. He'd even started writing a book about his experience, painting himself as a martyr. He's thriving in there, Monica told me over coffee one afternoon. Her tone was disgusted. He's found a new audience, a new way to manipulate. He's probably going to come out of prison with a following. What do you mean, come out? He got 25 years. With good behavior, he could be out in 15. And the way he's working the system, he'll probably get every reduction he can. He might be out in 12. 12 years. Trevor could be back on the streets in 12 years, free to hurt someone else, free to continue his campaign of lies and manipulation. Rebecca would only be in her mid-40s. Still young. Still vulnerable to whatever revenge Trevor might dream up during his incarceration. That wasn't acceptable. I started making calls. I called Detective Brennan and asked if there was any way to ensure Trevor served his full sentence. She said unless he did something wrong in prison, there wasn't much anyone could do. The parole system was designed to reward good behavior. I called the district attorney's office and asked if they were monitoring Trevor's activities in prison. They said they weren't. Once someone was convicted and sentenced, the DA's office moved on to other cases. I even called the prison warden's office to report that Trevor was using his prison privileges to continue harassing his victims through his writings. They told me that inmates had First Amendment rights and unless he was directly threatening someone, there wasn't anything they could do. The system, once again, was failing. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. Again. I contacted every single woman Trevor had ever hurt. Not just the ones who'd testified at his trial, but all of them, the ones Monica had found during her investigation, and others who'd come forward since then. I asked them if they'd be willing to write victim impact statements to the parole board for when Trevor eventually came up for parole. Every single one of them said yes. Then I did something that probably crossed a legal line, though I don't regret it for a second. I started my own letter-writing campaign. But I wasn't writing to men's rights forums or conservative websites. I was writing to inmates at Trevor's prison. You might think that's crazy. Why would I contact convicted criminals? Here's why. Inmates have their own justice system. Inside prison walls, certain crimes are seen as worse than others. And men who hurt women, especially men who hurt multiple women, are not well liked by the general prison population. Trevor had insulated himself from the worst of prison life by surrounding himself with white-collar criminals and staying in the safe areas. But all it would take was the right information getting to the right people to change that. So I wrote letters. Carefully worded letters that didn't explicitly call for violence, but that made sure certain facts were known. Letters that detailed Trevor's crimes. Letters that mentioned how he'd hurt women, controlled them, nearly killed them. Letters that included newspaper clippings about his trial and conviction. I sent these letters to inmates who had sisters, daughters, mothers they cared about. Inmates who might take a dim view of a man like Trevor. I never signed my real name. I never made direct threats. I just made sure information spread. And it did. Monica, who still had contacts in law enforcement, started hearing things. Trevor had been reassigned from his library job to the kitchen, a much less desirable position. He'd had a couple of incidents with other inmates, nothing serious enough to put him in protective custody, but enough to make his life uncomfortable. His cell had been accidentally flooded twice, destroying some of his correspondence course materials. His commissary account kept having technical problems that delayed his orders. Trevor was no longer thriving in prison. He was surviving, barely. I should have felt guilty about this. I should have questioned whether what I was doing was right. But every time I started to doubt myself, I thought about Jennifer Walsh lying dead at the bottom of a staircase. I thought about Rebecca's blue lips as I performed CPR on her. I thought about all the women Trevor had hurt and would hurt again if given the chance. My guilt disappeared. Rebecca didn't know what I was doing. I didn't tell her. She was finally healing, finally rebuilding her life, and I didn't want to drag her back into the darkness. As far as she knew, Trevor was in prison and that was the end of it. But then, about 2 years after his conviction, something happened that changed everything again. I got a call from Detective Brennan. "Patricia, I need you to sit down for this." My heart started pounding. What's wrong? Is Rebecca okay? Rebecca's fine. This isn't about her. It's about Trevor. And Jennifer Walsh. Jennifer Walsh. The woman Trevor had supposedly accidentally killed 3 years before he married Rebecca. What about her? I asked. We reopened her case after Trevor's conviction. We didn't find much at first. It had been too long, evidence was gone, witnesses had scattered. But then we got lucky. A woman came forward, Jennifer's neighbor from the apartment building. She'd been out of the country for the past few years, and when she came back and heard about Trevor's trial, she contacted us. What did she say? She said she saw Trevor in Jennifer's apartment the night she died. Said she was coming home late from work and saw him leaving Jennifer's door. He saw her too, and he told her he'd just been checking on Jennifer because she'd called him drunk and upset. The neighbor didn't think much of it at the time, believed him. But after hearing about the trial and all the other women, she realized she might have witnessed something important. My breath caught. You think he killed her? I think we can prove he killed her. We're reopening the investigation as a homicide. If we can build a case, and I think we can, Trevor's looking at murder charges. First-degree murder. That's life without parole, Patricia. Life without parole. Trevor would never get out. Never hurt anyone again. Never write his book or build his following or manipulate another soul. What do you need from me? I asked. Nothing right now. I just wanted you to know. And to thank you. Thank me? For what? For not giving up. For keeping this case in the public eye. That's why that neighbor came forward. She'd been following the news coverage, reading the articles. If you hadn't fought so hard to make people pay attention, she might never have realized what she'd witnessed. After Detective Brennan hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, just processing. Everything I'd done, the media campaign, the lawsuit defense, even the questionable letters to prison inmates, it had all been leading to this. Trevor was finally going to face consequences for all of his crimes, not just the one against Rebecca. Jennifer Walsh was finally going to get justice. The murder charges were filed 6 months later. Trevor tried to fight extradition back to Tennessee where Jennifer had died, but he lost. They transferred him to a maximum security facility to await trial, and this time there were no cushy library jobs or reform groups. This time he was in with murderers and violent offenders, the kind of men who didn't care about his sob story or his letter-writing campaign. The trial took another year to prepare. I attended every hearing, every pre-trial motion. So did Jennifer's family, her mother, her sister, her best friend from college. We all sat together in that courtroom, a group of women who'd loved someone Trevor had destroyed. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. The neighbor's testimony placing Trevor at Jennifer's apartment. Phone records showing he'd been harassing Jennifer in the weeks before her death. Testimony from Jennifer's friends that she'd been terrified of Trevor, that she'd told them he'd threatened to kill her if she ever tried to move on with her life. Medical evidence suggesting Jennifer's injuries weren't consistent with a simple fall downstairs, they were consistent with being pushed or thrown. And then there was the pattern. All those other women. All those other victims. The prosecution argued that Trevor had a documented history of violence against women, and Jennifer's death fit perfectly into that pattern. The jury deliberated for 2 days this time. When they came back, the verdict was guilty of murder in the 2nd degree. Life in prison. Possibility of parole after 25 years, but given Trevor's other conviction, the judge made it clear that parole was unlikely. Trevor was 51 years old. Even if he somehow got paroled at the earliest possible date, he'd be 76. An old man. Broken. Powerless. Jennifer's mother hugged me after the verdict was read. We stood there in the courthouse hallway, 2 mothers who'd lost daughters to the same monster, and we cried together. Except Jennifer's daughter was dead, and mine was alive. Thank you, Jennifer's mother whispered. Thank you for not letting them forget about Jennifer. Thank you for fighting. I'm sorry I couldn't fight sooner, I said. I'm sorry I didn't know about Jennifer in time to help her. You didn't know. But you knew about your daughter, and you saved her. And in saving her, you saved Jennifer's memory. You made sure he couldn't keep getting away with it. We kept in touch after that, Jennifer's mother and I. We became unlikely friends, bonded by tragedy but also by survival. She told me stories about Jennifer. What she was like as a child, her dreams, her kindness. I told her about Rebecca, about how she was rebuilding her life, going back to school, learning to trust again. Both of our daughters had been victims of Trevor Hastings. But only one of them had gotten a second chance. That knowledge haunted me. Still haunts me. Because I kept thinking, what if I'd spoken up sooner? What if I'd confronted Trevor the very first time I met him and my gut told me something was wrong? What if I'd been nosier, more aggressive, more willing to risk Rebecca being angry with me? Would Jennifer still be alive? I'll never know the answer to that. And I've had to learn to live with that uncertainty, that guilt, that terrible what if. But here's what I do know. I did everything I could once I understood what Trevor was. I fought back. I refused to be silent. I refused to let the system's failures be the end of the story. And because of that, Trevor will spend the rest of his life in prison. He'll never hurt another woman. He'll never laugh while someone drowns. He'll never push someone down the stairs or burn them with cigarettes or break their wrists or control their lives. He's done. And if you're reading this, if you've stayed with me through this long, painful story, I need you to understand something. You have more power than you think. If you see something wrong, speak up. If someone you love is in danger, act. Don't wait for the system to save them, because sometimes it won't. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because it might never come. Do whatever you have to do to protect the people you love. And if you've been a victim yourself, if you've survived something like what Rebecca survived or what Jennifer didn't, please know that your story matters. Your voice matters. And there are people like me, people like Rebecca, like Jennifer's mother, like all the women who testified against Trevor, who will stand with you. Check the description box below for resources, for hotlines, for organizations that can help. Because you don't have to face this alone. Rebecca graduated from college last year. She's 38 now, working as a counselor at a women's shelter, helping other survivors of domestic violence. She's engaged to a kind man named Thomas who treats her the way she deserves to be treated, with respect, with gentleness, with real love. She's happy. Finally. Genuinely happy. And that's the real victory. Not Trevor's conviction, though that mattered. Not the media attention or the lawsuits or any of it. The real victory is that Rebecca got her life back. She got to become the person she was always meant to be, the person Trevor tried to destroy. She survived. And she's thriving. That's what justice really looks like. Trevor's second conviction should have been the end of it. Life in prison for murder, 25 years for attempted murder, he wasn't getting out. Ever. And for most people, that would have been enough. The monster was caged. The women were safe. Justice was served. But I couldn't let it go. Because there was still one thing that bothered me, one question that kept me awake at night. Why? Why did Trevor do what he did? What made a man look at a woman, someone he supposedly loved, and decide she deserved to suffer? To drown? To die? I needed to understand. Not to forgive him, I would never forgive him. But to understand. Because understanding is how you prevent the next Trevor Hastings from hurting the next Rebecca. So I did something that shocked everyone who knew me. I put Trevor on my visitor list at the prison and requested a meeting. Rebecca was horrified. Mom, no. Why would you do that? Why would you give him the satisfaction of seeing you? I'm not giving him anything, I told her. I'm taking something. I'm taking the truth. You know the truth. He's a monster. I know what he did. I don't know why. Dr. Martinez, Rebecca's therapist, agreed with Rebecca. Patricia, visiting him could be re-traumatizing for you. It could also give Trevor a sense of power, the idea that he still has influence over your life. He has no power over me, I said. But I need to look him in the eye one more time. I need to hear him try to explain himself. What if he lies? What if he manipulates you? Then I'll know he's still the same person he always was. But what if he doesn't? What if, just once, he tells the truth? Janet Kowalski, my lawyer, was the only one who understood. Sometimes victims need closure, she said. And sometimes closure means confronting your abuser on your own terms, in a safe environment where they can't hurt you anymore. If you need to do this, Patricia, do it. So I did. The maximum security facility where Trevor was housed was 3 hours away, a grim concrete fortress surrounded by razor wire and guard towers. I drove there on a cold Tuesday morning in November, the sky grey and threatening rain. The security process was extensive: metal detectors, pat-downs, hand stamps, multiple locked doors. By the time I was led into the visitor's room, my heart was pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. The room was divided by thick plexiglass partitions. Prisoners sat on one side, visitors on the other, communicating through phones attached to the walls. It was depressing: fluorescent lights, institutional grey paint, the smell of industrial cleaner trying and failing to mask the scent of despair. I sat down at one of the stations and waited. When Trevor was brought in, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost weight, a lot of weight. His hair was grayer, thinner. His skin had a greyish prison pallor. But it was his eyes that shocked me the most. They were different. Harder. Older. The charming mask he used to wear was completely gone, and what was left was just emptiness. He sat down across from me and picked up the phone. I picked up mine. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. "Hello, Patricia," he said finally. His voice was hoarse, like he didn't use it much anymore. "Trevor. I was surprised when I got your visitor request. Surprised you'd want to see me after everything." "I don't want to see you," I said. "I need to see you. There's a difference." He almost smiled. "Almost. Fair enough. So why are you here?" "I want you to tell me why you did it. Why you hurt all those women. Why you tried to kill Rebecca. Why you killed Jennifer." "I didn't kill Jennifer," he said automatically. "That was an accident." "Don't lie to me. Not now. You've lost. You're in here for the rest of your life. The only thing you have left is the truth. So tell me, why?" He was quiet for a long time, just looking at me through the plexiglass. Then he said, "Do you really want to know?" "Yes." "All right. But you're not going to like the answer." He leaned back in his chair. "I did it because I could. Because it felt good. Because having that much power over someone, controlling their life, their thoughts, their fear, it was the only time I ever felt like I mattered." The honesty of it hit me like a punch. No excuses. No claims of childhood trauma or mental illness or I couldn't help myself. Just pure, simple truth. He did it because he wanted to. That's it. I said. "You destroyed all those lives because it made you feel important. You asked for the truth. That's the truth." He leaned forward again. "You want me to say I'm sorry? I'm not. I'm sorry I got caught. I'm sorry I'm stuck in here. But I'm not sorry for what I did. Those women, Rebecca included, they deserved what they got." My hand tightened around the phone. How did they deserve it? They were weak. Pathetic. They stayed with me even when I hurt them because they didn't think they deserved better. And you know what? They were right. They didn't. "Rebecca left you." Rebecca's mother intervened. If it had been just Rebecca, she'd still be with me. She'd have forgiven me for the lake, made excuses, taken me back. Just like she did every other time. "You're wrong," I said. "You underestimated her. You underestimated all of them." He shrugged. "Maybe. Doesn't matter now, does it? I'm in here, they're out there. Everyone wins. Jennifer doesn't win. She's dead." For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not guilt. I don't think Trevor was capable of guilt. But something. Recognition. Maybe. "Jennifer was different," he said quietly. "Different how?" "She was going to expose me. She kept records, journal entries, photographs of her injuries, recordings of our conversations. She was going to go to the police and make sure I went to prison. I couldn't let that happen." "So you killed her?" "I tried to reason with her first. I went to her apartment to talk to her, to convince her to drop it. But she wouldn't listen. She said I was a monster and that she was going to make sure everyone knew it. So I pushed her down the stairs." He said it so casually, like he was describing taking out the trash. "It was easier than I thought it would be. One shove, and it was over." I felt bile rise in my throat. "And you felt nothing?" I felt relieved. Problem solved. He studied me through the glass. "You're disgusted. I can see it on your face. But you know what, Patricia? I'm not that different from a lot of men. I just acted on things other men only think about. How many men have wanted to hurt their wives when they got moody? How many have wanted to shut them up permanently? I just didn't stop myself. You're not like other men. You're a monster. If that helps you sleep at night, sure. I'm a monster. But monsters are human too. We're just the ones who stopped pretending to be civilized." I wanted to hang up the phone. I wanted to leave that prison and never think about Trevor Hastings again. But I forced myself to ask one more question. "Do you think about them?" The women you hurt. Sometimes. When I'm bored. But mostly, no. They don't matter anymore. They mattered. Jennifer mattered. Rebecca matters. To you, maybe. Not to me. He leaned close to the glass, his eyes cold and empty. You want to know the real truth, Patricia? The only thing I regret is getting caught. If Rebecca had drowned that day like I planned, if you hadn't been there, if that kayaker hadn't showed up, I'd be free right now. Probably married to someone new. And you'd have buried your daughter thinking it was a tragic accident. My vision blurred with tears of rage. But I was there. And she's alive. And you're in here forever. True. But you know what's funny? Even now, even locked in this cage, I've got a following. Men write to me. They call me a hero for standing up to false accusations. They send me money for commissary. They tell me I'm inspiring them. He smiled, and it was the most chilling thing I'd ever seen. So maybe I didn't lose after all. You did lose, I said firmly. You lost your freedom. You lost your future. And history is going to remember you as exactly what you are, a murderer and an abuser. History is written by whoever tells the story loudest. And there are a lot of men out there telling my story their way. That's when I realized, visiting Trevor wasn't about getting closure. It wasn't about understanding him. Because there was nothing to understand. He wasn't complicated. He wasn't the product of a tragic past. He was simply a man who enjoyed hurting people and who felt no remorse for it. Some people are just evil. That's the truth no one wants to accept. We want to believe that everyone has reasons for what they do, that everyone can be redeemed, that everyone is secretly good deep down. But that's not true. Some people are broken in ways that can't be fixed. And Trevor was one of them. I stood up. I hope you spend every day for the rest of your life in this cage, Trevor. I hope you die here, alone and forgotten. I probably will, he said. But you'll spend the rest of your life thinking about me too, won't you? Wondering if there was something you could have done differently. Wondering if you could have saved Jennifer. I'll be in your head forever, Patricia. That's my victory. I hung up the phone without another word and walked out of that prison. He was right about one thing. I would think about him. But not the way he thought. I would think about him as a lesson, as a warning, as proof that evil exists and that good people have to fight against it every single day. When I got home, Rebecca was waiting for me. How was it? She asked nervously. Horrible, I said honestly. But necessary. Did he apologize? No. He's not capable of it. He doesn't feel sorry for what he did, Rebecca. He feels sorry he got caught. She nodded slowly. I needed to hear that. I needed to know that it wasn't me, that I couldn't have fixed him if I'd just tried harder. You couldn't have fixed him. No one could have. He doesn't want to be fixed. We sat together in my kitchen drinking tea, and I told her everything Trevor had said. Not to hurt her, but because she deserved to know the truth. She deserved to understand that his cruelty had nothing to do with her worth and everything to do with his emptiness. He said he has a following, Rebecca said. Men who support him. He does. And that's terrifying. But you know what's more powerful than his following? What? The community of survivors. The women who came forward. The organizations fighting domestic violence. The people who donated to the GoFundMe. The jury members who believed us. The detective who reopened Jennifer's case. All of those people combined are more powerful than Trevor and his angry men could ever be. Rebecca smiled, a real smile. You're right. I usually am, I said, and for the first time in months, we both laughed. Visiting Trevor was the last time I would ever think of him as anything more than a cautionary tale. He wasn't worth my energy or my grief. But the fight against men like him? That was worth everything. If you've made it this far in my story, I want you to understand something important. Closure doesn't always look like apologies and redemption. Sometimes closure is accepting that the person who hurt you will never change, never feel sorry, never become the person you hoped they would be. And that's okay. Because your healing doesn't depend on their redemption. It depends on you choosing to move forward anyway. Share this story if it resonated with you. Comment below with your own experiences. And please, check the description box for resources if you or someone you know needs help escaping an abusive relationship. Because the next Trevor Hastings might already be in your life or someone else's, And the only way to stop him is to act. After my visit with Trevor, something shifted in me. I'd been carrying this weight, this need to understand him, to find meaning in what he'd done, to somehow make sense of senseless cruelty. But once I accepted that there was no deeper meaning, no hidden explanation beyond he enjoyed hurting people, I felt lighter. Free, almost. That freedom allowed me to refocus my energy on something more productive, prevention. Because here's what I'd learned through this nightmare. The system is reactive, not proactive. Police get involved after someone's already been hurt. Courts prosecute after a crime has been committed. Shelters take women in after they've finally escaped. But what about before? What about stopping the Trevor Hastings of the world before they destroy lives? That's when I decided to start the foundation. It took me 6 months to set up. I worked with Janet Kowalski to establish the legal framework, with Dr. Martinez to develop educational programs, and with Monica Reeves to create safety protocols. We called it the Jennifer Walsh Foundation for Domestic Violence Prevention, in honor of the woman whose death should have been prevented. Our mission was simple: teach people, especially young people, how to recognize the early warning signs of abuse before it escalates. Because that was the key. Trevor didn't start out attempting to murder Rebecca. He started small, testing boundaries, making subtle comments about her appearance, her friends, her choices, gradually isolating her, slowly eroding her self-esteem. By the time the physical abuse started, Rebecca was already so broken down that she didn't trust her own judgment anymore. If someone had taught her what to look for early on, maybe she would have left before it got that bad. If someone had taught Trevor's earlier victims, maybe Jennifer would still be alive. We started in high schools. Dr. Martinez developed a curriculum about healthy relationships versus abusive ones. We didn't lecture, we facilitated discussions. We showed scenarios and asked students to identify red flags. We taught them about love bombing, the excessive early affection that abusers use to hook victims, gaslighting, making someone doubt their own reality, isolation tactics, financial control, and escalation patterns. The first school we approached was reluctant. The principal worried about parental backlash, about being too controversial. But then I showed him the statistics. 1 in 3 women will experience physical violence from a partner in her lifetime. 1 in 4 girls will be in an abusive relationship before they graduate high school. You already have students in abusive relationships, I told him. Right now. In your building. You can either pretend it's not happening, or you can give them the tools to recognize it and get out. He approved the program. Rebecca became one of our speakers. She was terrified at first. The idea of standing in front of a room full of teenagers and telling them about the worst moments of her life was overwhelming. But Dr. Martinez worked with her, helped her prepare, and on a cold morning in February, Rebecca stood in front of a classroom of 17-year-olds and told them her story. She told them about meeting Trevor. How charming he was. How he made her feel special and loved. How slowly, gradually, things changed. How the compliments turned into criticisms. How his protectiveness became controlling. How his jealousy escalated into violence. I didn't see it happening, Rebecca told them. I thought I was smart. I thought I could handle it. But abusers are good at what they do. They make you think you're the problem. They convince you that if you just behaved better, they'd stop hurting you. But that's a lie. It's always a lie. She showed them a picture of herself from the hospital after the lake incident. Pale, oxygen mask on her face, hair still damp, looking half dead. The classroom was silent. This is what happens when you don't recognize the warning signs, Rebecca said. This is what happens when you think love is supposed to hurt. I'm lucky to be alive. Not everyone is. After her presentation, 3 girls stayed behind to talk to Rebecca privately. All 3 were in abusive relationships. All 3 thought they were the only ones. All 3 believed they deserved the treatment they were getting. Rebecca gave them resources, hotline numbers, shelter information, safety plans. She told them they deserved better. She told them it wasn't their fault. 2 of those girls left their boyfriends within the month. The 3rd took longer, but eventually she left too. 3 lives potentially saved because Rebecca was brave enough to share her story. We expanded the program. More schools. Then community centers. Then churches. We trained teachers and counselors to recognize signs of abuse in their students. We created resource packets. We partnered with local women's shelters to ensure there were places for people to go if they decided to leave. And we started a hotline. The foundation didn't have much money, it was mostly funded by small donations and grants, but we scraped together enough to staff a crisis line 3 days a week. Monica volunteered her time. So did several of the women Trevor had hurt. So did Janet Kowalski and even Detective Brennan, who had retired from the police force by then. We called it the Second Chance Hotline. Because everyone deserved a second chance at life, at love, at safety. The calls we got were heartbreaking. Women calling from locked bathrooms while their partners raged outside. Teenagers whispering into phones in the middle of the night. Mothers calling on behalf of daughters who wouldn't admit what was happening. Men, yes, men, who were being abused and didn't know where to turn. Every call mattered. Every person we talked down from staying just one more night or convinced to make a safety plan or connected with resources, every single one was a victory. But the work was exhausting. Emotionally draining. There were nights I'd come home from the foundation office and just sob, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of suffering in the world, by how many Trevors were out there hurting people. Rebecca felt it too. Sometimes I wonder if we're making any difference at all, she said to me one night. We were at my house, eating dinner, both of us worn out from a long day of training sessions. For every person we help, there are 1,000 more we can't reach. That's true, I said. But that doesn't make the ones we do reach any less important. You can't save everyone, Rebecca. But you can save someone. And that someone's life matters just as much as everyone else's. She smiled tiredly. When did you get so wise? I'm 73 years old. If I wasn't wise by now, I'd be hopeless. The foundation grew. After 2 years, we were operating in 15 schools across 3 counties. We'd helped over 200 people escape abusive situations. We'd trained hundreds of teachers, counselors, and community members to recognize and respond to abuse. And then something unexpected happened. Trevor's story became a case study. Universities started teaching about the Trevor Hastings case in criminology classes, psychology courses, and women's studies programs. Law schools used his trials as examples of how to prosecute domestic violence and murder cases. The newspaper articles Frank DeLuca had written were compiled into a book about patterns of abuse and systemic failure. Trevor had wanted to be famous. He'd wanted his story told. And it was being told, just not the way he'd hoped. He wasn't being portrayed as a victim of false accusations. He was being portrayed as exactly what he was, a case study in predatory behavior and escalation. His name became synonymous with the danger of ignoring red flags, with the importance of believing victims, with the consequences of a system that fails to protect women. Jennifer's mother called me when the textbooks started coming out. I never thought something good could come from Jennifer's death, she said, crying. But if her story helps even one person recognize danger and get out before it's too late. It already has, I told her. It's helped dozens. Maybe hundreds. Jennifer's voice is still here, still protecting people, even though she's gone. The foundation eventually partnered with a tech company to develop an app. It was brilliant in its simplicity, a disguised app that looked like a calculator but was actually a safety tool. It had resources about abuse, a hidden journal feature where victims could document incidents, a quick exit button that instantly closed the app if an abuser walked in, and a one-touch emergency contact feature that could send your location and a distress message to trusted people. Within 6 months, the app had been downloaded over 50,000 times. 50,000 people who needed help, who were actively looking for ways to protect themselves, who were planning their escapes. How many lives did that app save? I'll never know the exact number. But I know it was more than 0. And in this work, more than 0 is a victory. Rebecca got married to Thomas in a small ceremony in my backyard. It was beautiful, simple, intimate, full of joy. She wore a white dress and flowers in her hair, and when Thomas looked at her, I saw something I'd never seen in Trevor's eyes, genuine love. Not possession. Not control. Just pure, uncomplicated love. During the reception, Rebecca pulled me aside. Mom, I need to tell you something. My heart jumped. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, actually. She took my hands. I'm pregnant. I burst into tears. Happy tears, the kind I hadn't cried in years. Oh, sweetheart. I know. I'm terrified. After everything with Trevor, the idea of bringing a child into the world, of being responsible for protecting someone so vulnerable. Her voice broke. What if I can't keep them safe? You will, I said firmly. Because you know what danger looks like now. You know the warning signs. You know how to protect yourself and the people you love. And you're not alone. You have Thomas, you have me, you have an entire community supporting you. What if my child asks about Trevor someday? What do I tell them? You tell them the truth. That their mother survived something terrible and became someone extraordinary because of it. That they come from a line of strong women who refuse to stay silent. That they're here because their grandmother screamed for help and their mother fought to live. She hugged me then, and we stood there in my backyard under string lights, crying and laughing and celebrating the future instead of mourning the past. Rebecca's daughter, my granddaughter, was born 7 months later. She was perfect. 8 pounds, 3 ounces, with Rebecca's eyes and Thomas's dimples. They named her Jennifer Patricia, after the woman who died and the grandmother who fought back. When I held little Jenny for the first time, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The pain. The fear. The courtroom battles. The sleepless nights. The foundation. The lives saved. All of it had been leading here, to this tiny person who would grow up in a world where her mother and grandmother had fought to make things just a little bit safer. "Hi, Jenny," I whispered to her. "I'm your grandmother. And I'm going to tell you stories when you're older. Stories about being strong. About fighting back. About how we don't let monsters win." She yawned and grabbed my finger with her tiny hand, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Real, uncomplicated hope for the future. The foundation continued to grow. By Jenny's first birthday, we were operating in 8 counties and had helped over 500 people escape abusive situations. We'd partnered with other organizations to create a network of resources across 3 states. We'd trained thousands of people to recognize abuse. And we started getting letters. Beautiful, heartbreaking, hopeful letters from people whose lives we'd touched. A woman who'd attended one of Rebecca's presentations in high school recognized the warning signs when her college boyfriend started becoming controlling. She left him before it escalated to violence. "Rebecca saved my life," she wrote. "And she probably doesn't even remember me." A teacher who'd been through our training program noticed bruises on a student's arms and knew the right questions to ask. The student disclosed abuse at home. The teacher called the authorities. The child was removed from the dangerous situation. "I wouldn't have known what to look for without your training," the teacher wrote. "Thank you for giving me the tools to protect my students." A man whose sister had been killed by her husband attended one of our community workshops and learned about the warning signs he'd missed. "I didn't know," he wrote. "I didn't know what love bombing was, or why she kept going back, or that strangulation was one of the biggest predictors of domestic homicide. If I'd known then what I know now, maybe I could have saved her. But because of your foundation, I helped my daughter leave her abusive boyfriend last month. I saved her. I didn't save my sister, but I saved my daughter." Those letters kept me going on the hard days. Because there were hard days. Days when the weight of all that suffering felt unbearable. Days when I questioned whether we were really making a difference or just putting band-aids on a bullet wound. But then I'd get a letter, or Rebecca would tell me about someone she'd helped, or I'd see little Jenny playing in my backyard, safe and loved and free, and I'd remember, we were making a difference. Maybe not the difference we wanted. We couldn't stop all the violence, couldn't save everyone, couldn't change the world overnight. But we were doing something. And something was infinitely better than nothing. Detective Brennan, Angela, as I'd come to call her, joined the Foundation's board of directors after she retired. "I spent 30 years responding to domestic violence calls," she told me. 30 years showing up after women had already been hurt. "I want to spend the rest of my life preventing those calls from ever having to be made." She brought credibility and expertise that helped us secure bigger grants and partnerships. She trained our hotline volunteers in safety planning and risk assessment. She worked with local police departments to improve their responses to domestic violence calls. "The system is slowly changing," Angela told me one afternoon. We were at the Foundation office, reviewing grant applications. "It's not changing fast enough, but it is changing. More departments are taking domestic violence seriously. More prosecutors are willing to pursue charges even when victims are afraid to testify. More judges are imposing serious consequences." "Is it enough?" I asked. "No. But it's progress. And progress is how change happens, slowly, incrementally, with people like you pushing every single day until things finally shift." Trevor tried to reach out a few more times over the years. Letters from prison that I refused to read and immediately returned. He tried calling the foundation once, collect from the prison phone. I declined the call. He had taken up enough of my life. I was done giving him space in my head. Monica told me he tried to file appeals on both convictions, claiming ineffective counsel, claiming new evidence, claiming anything he could think of to get a new trial. Every appeal was denied. The convictions stood. Life in prison for murder, 25 years for attempted murder, served consecutively. He would die in prison. There was no doubt about that now. How do you feel about that? Dr. Martinez asked me during one of the therapy sessions I'd started attending. Yes, I went to therapy too. Because you can't do the kind of work we were doing without it taking a toll on your mental health. I feel satisfied, I said. Not happy, exactly. I don't take joy in anyone's suffering, even his. But satisfied that he can't hurt anyone else. That justice was finally served. That the system, for once, actually worked. And do you still think about him? Sometimes. But not the way I used to. He's not a presence in my life anymore. He's just a fact. Something that happened. Something we survived. That's growth, Dr. Martinez said, smiling. That's healing. By the time Jenny was 3 years old, the foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We had a full-time staff of 7 people. We were operating in 15 counties across 4 states. We'd helped over 1,000 people escape abusive situations. Our app had been downloaded over 200,000 times. We'd done something real. Something lasting. Something that would outlive all of us. Rebecca spoke at a national conference on domestic violence prevention. She stood in front of hundreds of advocates, survivors, and professionals and told her story, not as a victim anymore, but as a survivor and an activist. My name is Rebecca Thornton Hayes, she said. 8 years ago, my husband tried to murder me. He pushed me into a lake and laughed while I drowned. But I'm here today because my mother refused to let me die. She screamed for help. She fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. She fought for justice when the system moved too slowly. And then she built something beautiful from the ashes of that trauma, a foundation that has helped thousands of people escape what I escaped. The room erupted in applause. I sat in the front row, crying, so proud of my daughter I thought my heart might burst. We can't always control what happens to us, Rebecca continued. But we can control what we do next. We can choose to survive. We can choose to fight back. We can choose to turn our pain into purpose. That's what my mother taught me. That's what the Jennifer Walsh Foundation is built on. And that's what I want to leave you with today. Your story isn't over. The worst thing that ever happened to you doesn't get to be the end of your story. You get to write the next chapter. And I promise you, it can be beautiful. More applause. Standing ovation. Rebecca's eyes found mine in the crowd, and we smiled at each other, 2 women who'd been through hell and decided to build something better on the other side. That night, back at the hotel, Rebecca tucked Jenny into bed and came to sit with me on the balcony. We looked out over the city lights, sipping tea, comfortable in silence. Thank you, Mom, Rebecca said finally. For what? For not giving up on me. For believing me. For fighting when I was too broken to fight. For building the foundation. For showing me that survival isn't enough. You have to live. Really live. You did the hard part, I said. You survived. You healed. You turned your pain into something that helps other people. That's all you, sweetheart. We did it together. Yes. We did. We sat there for a while longer, watching the city, thinking about how far we'd come. About Jennifer, who didn't get a second chance. About the 1,000+ people who did, because we'd fought for them. About little Jenny, sleeping peacefully inside, who would grow up knowing that her grandmother and mother were fighters, that women in her family didn't stay silent when they saw injustice. The foundation was our legacy. Not just mine or Rebecca's, but Jennifer's too. Every person we helped, every life we saved, every teenager who learned to recognize danger before it was too late. That was Jennifer's voice, still protecting people, still mattering, still here. And that, I thought, was the best kind of revenge against someone like Trevor. Not just his imprisonment, not just his exposure, but the fact that his victims rose up and built something beautiful and powerful from their pain. That we didn't just survive him, we transcended him. He wanted to destroy us. Instead, we saved others. If you're still reading this, still with me after all these words, I want you to know something. You're stronger than you think. Whatever you're facing, whatever you've survived, you have the power to turn it into something meaningful. You don't have to start a foundation or become an activist. Sometimes healing is enough. Sometimes just surviving is enough. But if you have more to give, if you have a story to tell, if you have a voice that needs to be heard, use it. Share it. Let it matter. Check the description box below for information about the Jennifer Walsh Foundation and other organizations fighting domestic violence. Because the fight isn't over. There are still too many Trevors in the world, still too many women and men being hurt, still too much silence protecting abusers. But there are also people like Rebecca, like me, like you, who refuse to stay silent. And together, we're louder than the monsters will ever be. Years passed. Jenny grew from a toddler into a curious, bright 7-year-old who loved books and science and asking impossible questions. Rebecca and Thomas had another child, a boy they named David, after the stranger who'd saved Rebecca's life at the lake. We'd tracked David Cole down eventually, thanked him properly, and he'd become a friend to our family. The foundation continued its work, but something interesting started happening around year 10. The young people we'd taught in those early high school programs were now adults. And they were making different choices because of what they'd learned. A young woman named Emma reached out to us. She'd been a sophomore when Rebecca first spoke at her school. "I'm getting married next month," Emma wrote, "and I wanted you to know that I credit your program with helping me choose the right person. I dated someone in college who showed warning signs, love bombing, jealousy, wanting to control who I hung out with. I recognized it because of your presentation. I ended it before it got worse. And then I met someone who treats me with respect, who trusts me, who sees me as an equal partner. I wouldn't have known the difference without you." We got dozens of letters like that. Young people who'd learned to recognize red flags and acted on that knowledge. People who'd intervened when they saw friends in dangerous relationships. Parents who'd had difficult but necessary conversations with their children about what healthy love actually looks like. The ripple effect was real. Every person we reached others. Every life we saved went on to potentially save others. The impact multiplied in ways we couldn't fully measure, but we could feel it. The foundation also started working on policy change. Angela Brennan spearheaded a campaign to improve how police departments responded to domestic violence calls. We pushed for mandatory training, for better evidence collection, for policies that didn't rely entirely on victim cooperation to press charges. "Too many women are afraid to testify," Angela explained at a city council meeting. "They're afraid of retaliation, afraid they won't be believed, afraid of the court process. But we can't let abusers walk free just because their victims are too traumatized or terrorized to cooperate. We need evidence-based prosecution that doesn't put the entire burden on the victim." It was an uphill battle. There were politicians who didn't want to fund new programs, law enforcement officials who resisted change, people who genuinely believed we were exaggerating the problem. But slowly, gradually, things changed. New laws passed. Training programs were implemented. More resources became available. And fewer women died. I can't prove a direct causal link, social change is too complex for that, but the statistics in our counties showed a decrease in domestic violence homicides over the 10 years the foundation operated. Maybe it was our programs. Maybe it was better police response. Maybe it was cultural shifts or a dozen other factors. But maybe, just maybe, some women were alive because we'd taught them to recognize danger early. Because we'd given them resources. Because we'd told them they deserved better. That possibility kept me going. Rebecca wrote a book about her experience. It was called Surviving the Lake, One Woman's Journey from Victim to Advocate. It was raw and honest and beautiful. She didn't shy away from the difficult parts, the shame she'd felt, the times she'd defended Trevor, the ways abuse had warped her thinking. "I need people to understand," Rebecca told me while she was writing it, "that leaving isn't easy. That abuse messes with your head. That it's not about being weak or stupid, it's about being trapped by someone who's systematically destroyed your sense of self-worth and agency." The book became a bestseller. Rebecca did interviews, podcasts, speaking tours. She became a nationally recognized voice on domestic violence issues. Politicians consulted with her. Universities invited her to speak. Survivors reached out to her from all over the world. My daughter, my Rebecca, who'd once been so broken I feared she'd never recover, had become a force of nature. And through it all, Trevor rotted in prison. I didn't follow his life closely anymore, but occasionally information filtered through. He'd been in fights with other inmates. He'd spent time in solitary confinement. His health was failing. Prison ages people quickly. His followers, those men who'd lionized him as a victim of false accusations, had mostly moved on to other causes, other martyrs. He'd been forgotten by everyone except the people whose lives he'd destroyed. And we weren't thinking about him anymore either. We were thinking about the people we were helping, the future we were building. That was the ultimate justice, I think. Not his suffering in prison, but his irrelevance. He'd wanted to matter, to be important, to have power. Instead, he was a cautionary tale, a footnote in a story that was ultimately about women's strength and resilience. When Jenny was 10, she asked me about the bad man for the first time. Rebecca and Thomas had told her an age-appropriate version of the story, that Mommy had been married before to someone who hurt her, that Grandma helped Mommy get away, and that the bad man went to prison. "Grandma," Jenny said, sitting at my kitchen table while we baked cookies together, "were you scared when you fought the bad man?" "Yes, sweetheart. I was very scared." "But you did it anyway." "I did it anyway. Because being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. Sometimes being brave means doing scary things because they need to be done." "Mommy says you saved her life." "Mommy and I saved each other, really. She was brave enough to leave. I was brave enough to help her. We were a team." Jenny thought about this, carefully measuring flour into a bowl. "When I grow up, I want to be brave like you and Mommy." "You already are brave, Jenny. You're brave every time you try something new, every time you stand up for someone, every time you tell the truth even when it's hard. Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are scared." She smiled at me, flour on her nose, and I thought about how different her life would be from her mother's. Jenny was growing up in a home full of love and respect. She was learning what healthy relationships looked like. She would know how to recognize danger. She would know she deserved to be treated well. The cycle was broken. That's what healing looks like, ultimately. Not just surviving, not just recovering, but changing the future so the next generation doesn't have to survive the same things you did. On the 15th anniversary of the lake incident, Rebecca and I drove back to Lake Harmon. We hadn't been back since that terrible day, but Rebecca wanted to go. She needed to face it. We stood at the spot where Trevor's rental dock had been. The lake was beautiful, sunlight sparkling on the water, birds calling, a gentle breeze rustling through the pine trees. It was hard to believe something so horrible had happened in such a peaceful place. "I used to have nightmares about this place," Rebecca said quietly. "For years, I'd dream about drowning, about hitting my head, about looking up through the water and seeing him standing there doing nothing." "Do you still have them?" "Not as much. And when I do, the dreams are different now. In the dreams, I survive. I come up out of the water and I'm okay. Sometimes you're there. Sometimes David's there. But I survive." We were quiet for a moment, just looking at the water. "Thank you, Mom," Rebecca said. "Not just for that day, but for everything after. For building the foundation. For turning the worst thing that ever happened to me into something that's helped so many other people. You helped build it too. We built it together." She took my hand. "Jennifer's mother called me last week. Did I tell you?" "No. How is she?" "She's okay. She told me she's made peace with Jennifer's death, as much as anyone can. She said knowing that Jennifer's story has saved lives makes it bearable somehow. That her daughter's name means something positive now instead of just being associated with tragedy. That's all any of us can ask for, I think. That our pain means something. That it changes things for the better." Rebecca nodded. "I used to be so angry. At Trevor, at the universe, at myself for staying with him as long as I did. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful. Grateful. That I survived. That I got a second chance. That I met Thomas and had Jenny and David. That I got to do meaningful work. That I turned the worst thing that ever happened to me into the best thing I've ever done." She looked at me. "Trevor took a lot from me. But he didn't take everything. And what I have left, my life, my family, my purpose, that's mine. He doesn't get to have any of it." We threw flowers into the lake that day. One for Jennifer, who never got her second chance. One for every woman Trevor had hurt. And one for Rebecca herself, for the woman who'd nearly drowned here, who was gone now, transformed into someone stronger. The flowers drifted on the surface of the water, bright splashes of color against the blue, and then slowly sank. But we stayed afloat. We survived. As we drove away from Lake Harmon, I looked in the rearview mirror at the water disappearing behind us, and I thought, this is the end. Not the end of our work, not the end of the foundation, but the end of Trevor's hold on us. We'd come back, faced the place where he'd tried to destroy us, and we'd walked away whole. He lost. We won. And that was enough. I'm 78 years old now. My hip bothers me more than it used to, my hands shake a little when I'm tired, and I can't remember where I put my reading glasses half the time. But my mind is sharp, and my purpose is clear. The Jennifer Walsh Foundation is 18 years old. It's bigger than I ever imagined it could be, operating in 12 states, with a staff of 42 people, countless volunteers, and partnerships with hundreds of organizations. We've helped over 10,000 people escape abusive situations. Our educational programs have reached hundreds of thousands of students. Our app has been downloaded over 1 million times. 1 million times. 1 million people who needed help, who were looking for resources, who were trying to survive. How many of them are alive today because of work we did? I'll never know the exact number. But I know it's more than zero. And in this work, more than zero has always been enough. Rebecca is the Foundation's executive director now. She's 48, confident, powerful, fully herself in ways that would have seemed impossible 18 years ago. She speaks at conferences around the world. She consults with legislators on domestic violence policy. She trains advocates and counselors and law enforcement officers. She's saved more lives than I can count. Jenny is 17 now, applying to colleges. She wants to study psychology and social work. I want to do what you and Grandma do, she told Rebecca. I want to help people. The legacy continues. David, Rebecca's son, is 14. A sweet kid who plays basketball and volunteers at the Foundation's youth programs. He doesn't remember his namesake, the man who saved his mother's life, but he knows the story. He knows he comes from a family of survivors and fighters. Thomas is still the kind, gentle man Rebecca married. He supports her work completely, takes care of the kids when she travels, never tries to control or diminish her. His proof that good men exist, that healthy love is possible, that not everyone will hurt you. Trevor Hastings died 3 years ago. Heart attack in prison. He was 65 years old. When I got the call informing me of his death, I felt nothing. Not happiness. Not sadness. Just a vague sense that a chapter had finally, definitively closed. Rebecca felt the same way. I thought I'd feel something, she said when we talked about it. Relief, maybe, or satisfaction. But I just feel nothing. He's been irrelevant to my life for so long that his death doesn't change anything. We didn't attend any memorial service. I doubt there was one. His family had disowned him years ago. His followers had forgotten him. He died alone and unmourned, exactly as he deserved. But Jennifer is remembered. We hold an annual memorial event in her honor, celebrating her life and the lives saved by the foundation that bears her name. Her mother speaks at it every year, and every year she thanks us for making sure her daughter's death meant something. Jennifer would be 47 now, she said at this year's memorial. She should be here. She should have gotten to live her life, fall in love again, maybe have children. But she didn't get that chance. So I take comfort in knowing that other people, hundreds, thousands of people, got chances they might not have had if you all hadn't fought to create this foundation. Jennifer's legacy isn't her death. It's all the lives that were saved because you refused to let her death be meaningless. I cried during that speech. I still cry sometimes, thinking about all the Jennifers who didn't make it, who died before anyone could help them, who never got their second chances. But I also think about all the women who did make it. The Emma who recognized warning signs and left before it got worse. The teacher who knew what questions to ask. The man who saved his daughter because he'd learned to recognize the danger his sister had faced. Every life saved is a victory against violence. Every person who escapes is proof that the monsters don't always win. The foundation will outlive me. That was always the goal, to build something sustainable, something that would continue after I was gone. Rebecca will lead it, and when she's ready to step back, there will be others. The work will continue. Because the need will continue. As much as we've accomplished, as many people as we've helped, there are still abusers out there. Still men and women hurting their partners. Still children growing up in violent homes. Still people trapped and scared and convinced they can't leave. The work is never done. But that's okay. That's what social change looks like, not a single victory, but a continuous effort. Not one person saving everyone, but many people each saving someone. I think about that day at the lake often. Not with trauma anymore, but with perspective. That was the day that changed everything. The day Trevor's cruelty was finally fully exposed. The day Rebecca almost died but didn't. The day I understood that sometimes you have to fight back even when the system fails you. If David Cole hadn't heard my screaming and come to help, Rebecca would have drowned. If I hadn't insisted on pressing charges, Trevor might have gotten away with it. If Rebecca hadn't been brave enough to testify, he might have walked free. If we hadn't built the foundation, thousands of people might still be trapped in abusive relationships. Every choice mattered. Every action had consequences that rippled outward in ways we couldn't fully see. That's the lesson I want to leave with you. Whoever you are, wherever you're reading or watching this from, your choices matter. Your voice matters. Your refusal to stay silent when you see injustice matters. You might think you're just one person, that you can't possibly make a difference in a world with so much suffering. But you can. You absolutely can. Maybe you can't save everyone. But you can save someone. Maybe you can't change the whole system. But you can change one piece of it. Maybe you can't stop all violence. But you can stop one person from being hurt. And that person's life is just as valuable as anyone else's. If you're in an abusive relationship right now, please know, you deserve better. It's not your fault. You can leave. It won't be easy, and I'm not going to lie to you and say it will be simple. But you can survive. You can escape. You can build a new life. Check the description box below for resources. Call a hotline. Reach out to someone you trust. Make a safety plan. Do whatever you need to do to survive. Because your life matters. Your future matters. You matter. And if you're someone who loves a person in an abusive relationship, don't give up on them. Don't judge them for staying. Don't make ultimatums. Just be there. Offer resources. Let them know they can come to you when they're ready. Believe them when they tell you what's happening. Be the person I was for Rebecca. Be the person David Cole was, the stranger who heard someone screaming for help and didn't hesitate to act. The world changes one saved life at a time. One person standing up. One person speaking out. One person refusing to let the monsters win. 18 years ago, I watched my daughter nearly drown while her husband laughed. I felt helpless, terrified, convinced that the world was full of cruelty and that good people couldn't fight back. But we did fight back. We fought through the court system. We fought through public opinion. We fought by building something beautiful from our trauma. We fought by refusing to let Trevor's cruelty define us. And we won. Not just because he went to prison, though that mattered. We won because we survived. Because we thrived. Because we turned our pain into purpose and our trauma into transformation. That's the story I want you to remember. Not the drowning, not the abuse, not the violence. Remember the survival. Remember the resistance. Remember the foundation built from ashes, the lives saved, the legacy created. Remember that monsters don't always win. And remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to stay silent. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for staying with me through these difficult truths. And thank you for caring enough to want to make a difference. If this story touched you, share it. If it made you think, act on those thoughts. If it inspired you, let that inspiration move you to do something, big or small, to make the world safer for women, for children, for anyone who's vulnerable. Check the description box below for more stories of survival and resistance. For resources if you need help. For ways you can support organizations fighting domestic violence. Because together, we're stronger than the monsters will ever be. My name is Patricia Ann Thornton. I'm 78 years old. I watched my daughter nearly drown. And I spent the rest of my life making sure Trevor Hastings's cruelty wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of something better.